Welcome to Bonehead Weekly. It is an honor, and I don't mean that in any way facetiously. I know some people tune in to listen to us rip each other, make jokes about one another,
Piece of
but
shit.
I said at the live at Comic Con, I was like, and Chad and I have the longest relationships, pretty sure we hate each other. And all of a sudden, Chad looked over at me with a real sad face and goes, I don't hate you. I love my friends. I don't probably tell them enough. So I
You should
do.
tell us more often. Let me quote a meme. You should tell us more often. Tell us until you make it weird.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
said all
because
that to say,
yeah, I wouldn't have to pay the therapist so much money.
I said all
Oh,
that to
yes, you would.
Yeah, probably.
I said all that to say that we had the privilege of, and neither one of them could make it, and I wanted them to
No.
be part of the episode of Mr. Jim Shooter. So, real quick, and I'll let James and Chad talk about a little bit of his comic book stuff. But Shooter, I've been doing the convention stuff this fall, will make 10 years. God, I'm getting old. He
Getting.
I know I'm pretty old. He is the person I've probably interviewed or sat with the most on stage, and I brought this up to him, and he wasn't aware of it, but he also I don't think was overly shocked. He's also one of maybe three or four people in my life, and I won't say what he said to me, who gave me a compliment that it, and I'm hoping that both of you all have experienced this. It's something that somebody at the right time at the right place says to you, and you take it, and it just goes. I guess I'm being really sentimental and I shouldn't be, but it goes to your heart. And I love him for it. James, you want to talk a little bit and chat about his history and who Jim Shooter is, the man who saved Marvel?
Yeah, I mean, that's really saved Marvel, but also in its own right is an absolute creative force.
Secret Wars.
Because and that was the entire thing, and that all had to do with action figures, right? We had to get action figures, and I can remember being a kid, by the way, and that the black suited Spider-Man action figure that was
Yeah.
amazing, amazing. I think what he did for comic books, and I want to the youths today, what you may
Say
not,
you.
you kids today, and by that I mean none your kids don't listen to our show, but if you're under about the age of 30, it's really important to remember, and this is one of the questions I had Joe ask, that man, comic books were their own thing, and they existed in this little silo over here. And if you were a nerd, you went to the silo, you got your comic books, and you went back to the regular world. And you read your comic books there. Some of what he did Secret Wars, which led to these action figures being made because they wouldn't make action figures unless there was a huge crossover event type stuff. But then when he went to Valiant, we didn't have a lot of video games tied to comic book. And all of a sudden there was Turok, Son of Stone. And I can remember my roommate in college played it. And I said, that's based on a comic book, right? And he went, what? Right. And all of a sudden, in these little early, now we think Marvel's everywhere. And they announced today they had the chairs lined up and it was a 6 hour feed and people watched it live. I waited until it was a 14, a minute 40 clip. But and people are used to it being everywhere. It wasn't. And Jim Shooter made it be more places to where when I was a kid, I could have an action figure. When I was a kid and when I was a teenager, there were video games based on what historically, I mean, Turok, Son of Stone was a B grade gold key comic in the 1960s that all of a sudden became a modern comic book video game. And it was, if his hands weren't directly in that, they were behind the scenes allowing it in some ways and putting this material out there. And then he created his own imprints and he did all these different things. So I think of him very, very fondly, and I have not sat with him the way Joe has. But as a geek, and I know, one of my other heroes, Harlan Ellison, talked about how, was not a big fan, was not a big fan
But he
of
gives
shoot.
a Harlan story in this interview for you, James.
Yeah, was not. Yeah, and really, it's one of those things. And as I even framed in the question, if I remember correctly, if Harlan wasn't mad at you at some point, you didn't exist. Like he was just known for being. Joe used the term curmudgeon,
Sorry.
but no, and so, but yeah, so I just really appreciate and the fact that he gave him time. And I want to go on the record real quick and say we have had a lot of guests on this show. I do want to point out, man, people who work in comics give us a lot of time.
They do. They give back. They
They
do.
give
And they
back. And
and they
so
care about the fans and they care about the people who are collectors of it.
and want to capture these stories.
Yeah. Chad?
So
No, it's just I've been a I've admired Shooter just because of his not only because he's mostly known a lot for Marvel and Valiant and founding Defiant and Broadway
Mhm.
Comics, but he got to start in DC Comics, which I'm a DC guy, always have been, and he. If I'm not mistaken from my DC lore, which I'm pretty sure I am, he created one of my favorite Superman villains, which is Parasite. I would have loved to talk to him about his, the story about, creating Parasite. And I am not a Legion, uh, much to our friend John's chagrin. I am not a fan of the Legionnaires, but I do like I did not realize until I was doing research that he created Feral Lad, which is actually the only character from the Legionnaires that I actually enjoy. And he created him as well.
Yeah.
So Jim Shooter has done a lot in comics beyond more than I could even contemplate. And I would have loved to got to hear some of his stories. Then Joe got to actually has had numerous conversations with him.
And
And
another one of those questions have been asked, and hopefully we'll have Jim back on. We've promised that he's promised that he'll do it again so that we can both get it all scheduled with you two as well. We did 2 hours, and he gave me permission to ask some tough questions, especially about a lot of the hate that's out there and a lot of the stories that are either true or not true, but most of them aren't true, and a lot of the hate that he gets that isn't quite factual. So this has been our time. I want to thank Jim. Check it out. 2 hours where we cover a myriad of topics and a really good Harlan Ellison story.
real quick, by the way,
Yeah.
and I know you said we're wrapping up. The man has almost 60 years working in comics. Started at age 14. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
No, he did. That's
14.
the only story. I promised I wouldn't do that story. Actually,
Oh,
was the only thing he asked me to do was because he's just been asked about it. But yeah, he supported his family writing comic books at 14.
Right. His dad didn't have an. He was walking to work because his car broke down.
He supported his family at
Yeah.
14 writing comic books. He was going to New York City and staying by himself,
Hmm.
and no one thought anything of it.
meanwhile, I'm trying to get my kids to go to other places so
He
I don't
was
have to think anything of it.
when he was running Marvel, he was a pup.
Oh yeah.
And it's something that we talk about in this because as someone who's leadership role for many years, I was curious about, hey, I was 36, 37 when I started full-time staff. And I was like, dude, how'd you do that? At even younger than that. This is our interview with Jim Shooter. Jim, I love you. And thank you so much. And I can't wait to have you back on the show. Mr. Jim Shooter, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I guess I should give a little bit. I know we've got an intro that happened before this, but I'll give a little bit of for people who may not know, you're the one I've interviewed the most on stage over the years. I mean,
Oh,
there's been other repeat customers, but as far as on stage, it's you. I don't know if you knew that or not.
maybe you mentioned it once. I don't know.
And I was kind of upset that I didn't get to do it again this year at Lexington Comic Con. My colleague, Mr. John Stith, did that. So, but
Yeah,
that's
it would have
okay.
been fun, but he did pretty well.
Did he? Well, don't tell him that. It'll go straight to his head. And so I didn't tell you this when we had a conversation the other day. We were talking about what we were going to talk about, what you wanted to talk about, what was on limits and what's off limits and what's appropriate, not appropriate. And of course, you said everything's appropriate.
Yes.
But I reached out to some people and I wanted them to send questions.
Okay.
So we're going to go through those as we go.
Uh,
But to start on a positive, you may want to, I am going to, because some of the questions are kind of hard hitting, but you were fine with that, right?
I don't care.
I didn't
Right.
think so. But I wanted you to hear one of the compliments. So we both know Katrina from Lexington Comic Con,
Yes, we
right?
do.
Just tell him that I love him and he holds a special place in my heart.
Oh, that's nice. Katrina's a gem. She's wonderful.
Yeah, I actually 100 I can't agree with you more about that. Even though I know she has such a pressure cooker job. I just wanted to start off with that one before we
Yeah.
go ahead. Um, when I was doing these questions and coming back and forth, and we'll pop in the people who've asked questions as we go, because you and I are both on the opposite end of like there's more in behind us than there is in front of us. And that's true for me too. But I was curious because I've never asked you this. When the word legacy is used, do you give a shit?
No, not at all.
So tell me your
That's up to other people. I don't know. They'll, I did what I did. I did the best I could.
talk about it though. What do you what if you don't care, what is it that you're most, I don't know about the word most proud of, but what is one of those things that, because I mean, I always give you credit when you're on stage of you're the one that gave health insurance to these people. You're the
That's
one that
right.
gave pencil and paper to these people. You're the one
Right.
who actually gave two shits to think about the things that would make their lives easier and also give them the ability to have health insurance and take care of their families.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to point all that out. So
Yeah.
I'm
Well, that's probably the best thing I ever did I've been on the other side of the desk a long time. And in those days, when I started in the 60s and before, and through the 70s, it was all just page rate. I mean, you wrote or drew your pages, you turned them in, you got so much money a page. It wasn't much. And the company owned everything, and you got no rights, no benefits, no nothing. You just got your page rate. That was it. And it was you had to either really, really love comics, which I did, or just be desperate for a job or can't get anything else. And a lot of people, when they could get anything else, they would leave comics,
yeah.
and so I like I said, I love comics, and I wanted to fix that. I wanted to, well, it was do or die too. I mean, comics were in a death spiral. So
So did you, I know Stan told this story so many times because nobody was better at promoting Stan than Stan, right?
yeah. Yes,
That's what Kevin Smith has even said. It's like nobody knew how to promote Stan better than Stan, whether you loved him or not. He
I
was,
did love him, and he deserved every accolade he ever got.
that's great. So, but I know that at parties, he would tell people he did something else sometimes before, especially in the early days. Did you ever feel ashamed of being a comic person?
No, not at all. It was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Look, in Stan's era, when he was growing up,
Mm-hmm.
what you wanted to be was a syndicated cartoonist, because then you're Milt Caniff and you live in a big house on the hill and you have a fancy car, because they made a lot of money. It was the rock stars of the comics biz. And comic books, our kind of comic books started because there were too many people trying to get their syndicated strip published and they couldn't. And publishers found out they could hire these guys cheap and crank out these comic books. And so that was a lot of the guys, that was their kind of temporary job while they were hoping to sell their syndicated strip. And so why did they pay so cheap? Because they used to just reprint the comics and they got that cheap. So they didn't want to pay a lot more for new stuff. But at any rate, that's why a lot of those guys change their names. I mean, Stanley Lieber changed his name to Stan Lee. Why? To save his real name for when he got his syndicated strip or wrote the great American novel,
You beat me
or
to it.
or
I was about to
or,
say that.
or it's some other, grander achievement. And I used to tell Stan, I said, Stan, you always talk about, oh, you wish you were publishing a magazine. I said, why? You made comics popular around the world, and comics made you a superstar. What's your problem? And he said, oh, well, I don't know. It's great, but boy, I really wish I would, have a magazine. And, like he thought of comics as sort of second class publishing, magazines, books, stuff like that. That was when syndicated strip, especially.
Yeah.
That's when you made it.
Well, it's like actors and writer, and it's that old cliche. If you're a film geek like me, what you really want to do is direct.
Well, yeah, okay. You were the auteur.
No, do you know what I mean? It's just that's
Yes.
yeah. You always want whatever it is, if bigger and better. But how did you embrace it so well then? How did you not come out of it looking back at it and saying, "Oh," because there is so many ways through this that you could have had just a bad taste in your mouth from the as many times as you've been screwed over.
Yes.
And it doesn't come and truthfully, we're not best friends, but I'd like to call you a friend.
Sure.
And I've never, even when you have things to say and we've had a couple of drinks, you've never been just visceral of anger coming out.
No, I love these books that these jerks write, about the secrets behind the Marvel comics back in the 70s or 80s or whatever. They weren't there. They don't know. They didn't ask. And they fantasize all of my plans and my schemes and who I was out to get and all that. And I'm like, what? You're a bunch of
Assholes.
terrible, you know, basically just trying to put together a sensational book and sell some copies. But I was never like that. I never was out to get anybody. And I just I thought I had a good opportunity there to do something useful, and I loved what I was doing. And I tried to do the best I could for everybody. And I made mistakes, but never did I do something in self-interest. I never uh, stole anybody's money or slept with their wife or killed their dog or anything. I just tried to make it as good as I could for everyone. And like I wish it had been when I was on that side of the desk. Sometimes I thought about being on that side of the desk, but I really did enjoy what I was doing.
Yeah, you and I had a long conversation a few years ago, and we were talking about this the other day about management. And I was managing management. I actually prefer to consider myself more of kind of you kind of lead more than manage. I don't know how to manage everybody day to day. You kind of hire the best people and let them do
Yeah.
their job, right? That's
That's
what you
what you
and I
do.
talked.
You don't have the less you can manage, the better off you are. If you get a bunch of really talented people and get them all marching in vaguely the same direction, wonderful things happen.
But if you don't mind me talking about some of the negative stuff.
Go ahead.
I'm not going negative. That's not where I want to. I
No,
just
go ahead.
want you to
All right.
no, I want you to give you the platform to address this. And
Okay.
please feel free to say this is shit or what have you.
Oh,
Don't,
don't worry about me, man, huh?
right. No, I know. I just wanted to let you know this is
This
not
point, I call a spade a spade.
right. Who gives a shit? Shooter had been great for the first 2 or 3 years. He got the creative people treated with more respect, got us sent to conventions, first class, ways paid. We thought the world of him. Then Secret Wars was a big hit, and after that, he decided he knew everything and started changing everybody's stuff.
I never interfered with anybody's stuff except if they were really going off the rails. I don't know where the hell they got that, but ask Louise, ask Larry. How many times did I go into Larry's office and dictate anything to him? No, you don't have to tell Larry Hom anything. I never told Archie Goodwin anything. I gave him a couple ideas once, and once I had to talk him into it, but he went along with it, and it turned out to be Electra Assassin, the limited series.
Yeah.
Uh, I did that, and he was pleased with it. It came out pretty good. Um, but no, I didn't do that. There's all this thing about, oh, he took this guy off that book and no, I didn't. I left that up to the editors. The editors, I never told a single editor one time, can't use this guy, must use this guy. Never once. I let them pick. And if I thought there was some problem or maybe, it was an odd choice or it wasn't working out, I might talk to them. We might have a collegial discussion about it. I had my doubts about what was that book Larry did, Dakota North,
Mm-hmm.
where he had an artist, I think it's Tony Salmons, maybe.
I,
And Tony was like new to comics. I mean,
yeah.
he's quite a good, fine artist, but I think Larry thought he could really you know, he might have another Sienkiewicz on his hands there. But he convinced me that this was worth a try. And look, if Larry Hama wants to experiment, let him go. Okay, he earned it. And so I just, God bless you.
Well, where do you think a lot of the negativity comes from? What do you think instigated it? Is it the making them hit their deadlines and
A
making the
lot of that.
trains run on time? Do you think that's where the negativity started? And I have a theory once you've answered.
Well, I think a lot of that. I mean, when I came in there, that place was a train wreck. I discovered there was embezzling going on. One guy was embezzling $250,000 a year. It was just some outright theft. The
Yeah.
receptionist was stealing all the cash out of the out of the subscription money. Everybody was using the Marvel's mailroom to, mail boxes of books back home and stuff. Uh, They're just and a lot of really unprofessional, bad behavior. Are you people kidding me? This isn't an amateur operation, and so I mean I had a lot to clean up, and the biggest thing was the schedule because everybody had just, gotten used to, well, I'll deliver it when I want to. And so many books were late. And here the thing is, what people don't understand is when I was hired to be editor in chief, the president of the company told me, he says, "You're here to preside over the death of Marvel Comics."
Yeah.
Those words. And he said, this is a totally loser business. I'm getting us out of it. I'm going to get us into children's books and animation. And I argued with him. I said, you're wrong. I said, this can be big and we can make it big. It's going to take a while, but we can make it big. He's all baloney. And I said, no, a lot of things, are going to have to change, but I really think we got a very bright future. And he couldn't believe that. And I said, I'm going to need some money. He said, forget it. No way. And he said, I'm not investing a penny in this thing. And I said, well, how about this? If I save money or if I beat my projections, I get to use that money. And he said, I don't care what you both, more or less, I don't give a damn what you do. Just don't lose money. He just wanted me to not lose money until he got us out of the comics business. So I don't give a damn what you do is a pretty free hand,
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, he never did really, or I never had any problems with him management-wise. It was once I was beating my projections and saving money, he didn't want even want to look at it. He was interested in the bottom line, the balance sheet, the licensing, the business aspects that he preferred. You go into his office, there wasn't a single image of Spider-Man or anything there. There was no comics on the table. It was nothing. You might as well be going into an investment banker's office.
Yeah.
But so I pretty much had my way, except occasionally he'd get some wild hair and say, "Hey, I saw this Sectaurs thing. I think you should do a comic book of Sectaurs." Well, he's the only guy who could overrule me.
Mm-hmm.
He says, we're doing Sectaurs. They're doing Sectaurs. I didn't want to do Sectaurs. I mean, it has to be a super toy. It has to be G.I. Joe or Transformers. But you get some crazy ideas sometimes, and US1. Give me a break. Anyway, so you cannot believe how many I successfully fended off. But
I can.
I didn't really have an issue there, and once I got us on time, that was difficult, and a lot of guys put up resistance and stuff, and I had to just stand my ground. I had got one guy he's supposed to write 3 books a month, and he was only delivering 2 scripts. Now that doesn't mean that one is late. That means all 3 are late. Okay. Yep. And so I said, why don't you give one up? You pick. I don't care. And then catch up on the other ones. And then when you get ahead, you can have another one. Because you're cutting my income by 1/3. I said, no, I'm not. You only get paid for what you deliver. It's you're only delivering 2. You're getting paid for 2, and catch up on those, and then maybe there's a 3rd book. So he quits. All right. Well, I mean, but that was up against that every day, all day, and also the people who were stealing and doing corrupt things were not happy to be exposed. Or one guy I had to fire because he literally stolen thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And people think, oh, that evil tyrant, he fired all these people. You know what? In 10 years, I fired fewer people than died, and I didn't kill them. I mean,
allegedly.
Yeah, I mean, it's very few, because I didn't want to mess with people's careers or their livelihoods. I didn't want to. I really hated to pull that trigger, but when it got ugly, if you tell me the guy's name, I'll tell you what part of the problem he was, how I tried to fix it in a amicable way, and then what happened. And I don't feel like I ever did anything out of malice, never once.
Yeah. I don't imagine you doing it either, but I wanted to give you, and please, if you think I'm going negative, it's not. I wanted to give you time and a space to rebut these things. because there's two sides to every story. And I feel like you said something to me the other day for our audience to know that if it's a positive interview, it may have 5 or 10,000 views. But if it's one of those negative, let's bash or knock the shit out of Jim Shooter, it's going to have 1 million.
Yeah, it's true. People like that stuff. All right, that's fine.
I get it, but at least we can go on the record of saying your perspective, whether
That's
people
true.
tend
And
to pay attention to it or not.
right, and like I said, all of these guys, they just make stuff up. I mean, one guy, well, I won't give you his name because it's not fair, but this one guy who has been vociferous and outspoken, who was a regular at Marvel and did really well.
Yeah.
What's your problem? But he'll talk about Marvel's smoke-filled boardroom and all of us evil executives plotting about, how to destroy First Comics. We didn't have a boardroom. The board of directors was in West Caldwell, New Jersey, and it wasn't ours. It was the Cadence Industries boardroom. And B, there was no Marvel executive who could name 3 comic book companies except me. And I saw that for a fact.
Mm-hmm.
The president, Jim Galton, on a witness stand where he was testifying as an expert witness, he came up with Marvel, of course, it didn't count, DC, and I think he came up with Harvey or something. I mean, he couldn't come up with a third name.
Right.
Because he didn't know, he didn't care, he didn't want to care. He wanted that just to go fine. Oh, P.S.
Yeah.
He did get his production studio, his animation studio, and he did get his children's publishing unit with money we made for him. Okay.
Yeah.
And they both failed. But we were doing fine.
Can I give you what I think part of it is? And maybe I'm wrong, and I'm curious to see what your opinion is of this. So you were born in 1951?
That's true.
You took over January 1978.
Well, as editor-in-chief, yes.
Okay. My calculations, that made you either 26 something or
26.
27.
26. I turned 27 that year.
How hard was it? And this is coming from somebody who in a week will be 47. How hard was it walking into a room and a lot of people just thinking you are this fucking kid? Forgive my, well, no, that's
Right.
that's what have went through my head.
Well, no, that was a thing. I mean, what it wasn't hard for me because I've been in the business 13 years.
Oh,
I had a lot of good training, and I'd worked with some of the greatest people that ever did this kind of work. I worked for Mort Weisinger at DC for 5 years, and Mort was, famously mean, and I can certify that. But he taught me so much, and it wasn't just about comics. I mean, you'd think, well, he's an editor, I'm a writer, I'd learn about stories, storytelling, stuff like that. Well, yes, I did. But he also would sit me down on with the Jack Adler, the production guy, and get me to learn about in-house production, printing production, distribution. He talked to me about merchandising and licensing and international, and talked to me. I learned coloring from Tatiana Wood. I would spend time, getting a lecture about inking and stuff. I used to think, why is he teaching me all this stuff? And then on top of that, he did a lot of talking about the economics of comics,
yeah.
and economics in general, in fact. And so you didn't ask him any questions. There's no way. But I asked his assistant once. I said, why is it? Why do I have to learn all this stuff?" And his assistant, E. Nelson Bridwell, said to me, "He's training you to have a job like his." I said, "What? He's always calling me a moron, you know?"
Yeah.
I said, "Well, no, he thinks you have potential." Well, it turned out I did end up with a job like his. It was at a different company. And I'll tell you one little thing that sort of my proof of the pudding. When I was working my way through high school, of course, from ages 13 through 18.
Supporting the family.
And And as a senior in Bethel Park Senior High School, you were required to take a class called economics, unless you were taking AP English or something. So everybody shows up for our first day of economics, and the teacher's name was Mr. Blackburn. Never forget him. And we all sit down the first day, and he passes out a test. He says, "This is my final exam." What? This is my final exam. I want to find out what you guys don't know. And so everybody, groaning and moaning and everything, we do his final exam on the first day.
Yeah.
The next day he calls me up to his desk and he said, "In all my years, no one has ever gotten 100% on my final." And on the first day, on the first day. So he said, "You don't have to take this class. You already passed it." Gave me a permanent hall pass, which was great because then I'd go to the library and do other people's homework. Because I was working all night with the comics and on weekends and stuff. I didn't really have time to keep up with some of the homework from other teachers.
Yeah.
So that was a little godsend. But I mean, the fact that I knew the terms and I could understand what the questions were, and if I didn't know for sure, I could make a good guess. And I knew what I was doing. And when I was upstairs, when I was that 26-year-old kid walking into those meetings upstairs with the business and financial people, and I spoke their language,
Mhm.
I don't think they cared I was 26 anymore.
I'm just curious because you had to get shit about it. In my head, it had to happen. Or is it because you're such a tall and no offense, especially I'm sure at 26, with that dark mane of hair, tall and imposing, menacing
Yeah.
even.
Well, I'll tell you what, the old guys, all the old pros,
Hmm.
they'd say, "Yes, sir," and they do what I had. They saluted the uniform. I don't know what they thought of me. I don't care.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing is, I think they were a little surprised that when I asked them something, it was reasonable and it
Hmm.
made sense. You know, the only flack I got was from the younger guys who say, "Well, who the hell are you to tell me anything?"
Yeah.
Well, I've been doing this 13 years and I think I do know some stuff, and I am the boss. So, this is what we're going to do. I didn't dictate storylines. I didn't dictate any particular, you must do this, you can't do that. What I tried to do was get them to tell a good story and tell it well. And the only thing I guarded against was damaging the character badly or destroying the series, because that was part of my job, is to protect those franchises. So when one guy comes in, he says he wanted to have Spider-Man father an illegitimate child. No, I'm sorry, you can't do that, because we have licenses all over the world that say we won't do stuff like that. And it's out of character for Spider-Man. He's responsible. He blew it with his uncle. He'll never blow it again.
So what about this is another criticism that's come up so that I can tell that I'll back in with it as far
Sure.
as introducing gay characters, homosexual
Oh yeah.
characters, because it is a criticism that comes up online,
Oh, of course it does.
specifically about you.
Yes, it's nonsense. I mean, basically, uh, I was writing an issue of the Hulk magazine. It was the
Hmm.
last issue. Marvel, or maybe comic writers in general, they have a superstition about writing the last issue. Nobody wants to write the last issue. And so I often wrote the last issue of whatever it was, Team America or Hulk or whatever. Even the last issue of Dracula. I wrote the magazine,
Hmm.
wrote that because no one else would. So anyway, I wanted to accomplish a number of things in that story. Number one, the Hulk was on TV then, and I wanted to play it a little. It was supposed to be an adult magazine, and not just Hulk smash and he hits the ground and all the soldiers fall over. It was supposed to have some real content. Number two, he was sort of the fugitive. He was on the run, and like I said, sort of more mature content. I don't mean sex and violence. I
No, I
mean
understand what you
just
meant.
more thoughtful.
Yeah.
So
Labels.
I remembered. I thought, well, here's this guy. If he comes to New York, where's he going to stay? Well, in those days, you could stay at the YMCA for $7 a night,
Hmm.
and he'd stay at the Y, And then I remembered, one time on one of my business trips to New York when I was in high school, I think I was 15. and a classmate of mine, a friend of mine, he was also 15, and his family is significantly better off than mine. So he said, "You're going to New York?" I said, "Yeah, this is in the summer." He said, "I want to go with you." And I said, "Mike, no, I'm going to be working. It's not just for fun. He says, "So what?" He's, you go to work and then we'll get together at night." And I said, "Well, I said, look, they're not going to pay for you."
Yeah.
And he said, "No problem." I mean, his parents were willing to ante up. And think about it. That's the 60s. Two 15-year-old kids getting on a plane, flying to New York, checking into a hotel. These days, they'd arrest the parents.
There's no way in hell. We're both
No,
dads.
those days, nobody batted an eye.
Would
I,
you have let your son do it?
I don't know. It depends, I guess. I probably get arrested. But at any rate, nobody thought anything of it. The airline didn't think anything of it. The hotel didn't think anything of it. The people in the office, nobody batted an eye. It seemed okay. So we did that. And because he had a fairly limited budget, I think the first night we stayed at the Y
Yeah.
just to preserve capital. And it was middle of summer sometime. It was hot as hell. We're staying at the McBurney Y on 23rd Street, and we go to open the window because it's so hot. There's bars on the window that prevent the window from opening more than a crack.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on here? And so anyway, we're just sweltering and trying to get through the night, and then I don't know, 2 or 3 in the morning, he decides he wants to go take a shower. Probably not a good idea. Well, so he goes there and he gets attacked in the shower by this gang of,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, gay rapists.
Yes, absolutely.
And so he gets away because he's soapy and he's slippery. He goes running down the hallway naked, screaming for me to open the door. And I opened the door and I closed it just in time because those guys were after him. And so he lost everything, his clothes, his glasses, and everything. But they fortunately didn't take his wallet.
Mm-hmm.
But so I remembered that incident, and I thought, how can I use that? And then I remembered that one of the things that a lot of the comic book writers did wrong, and I kept trying to get this through their heads, is that what they kept having, even Lent's a good writer, but he would have Banner get in trouble and then somehow get turned into the Hulk and then beat up the bad guys and everything's fine.
Like a Deus Ex Machina.
No, 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 no. The point of the Hulk is that when he becomes the Hulk, it makes it worse. That's why he fears becoming the Hulk. They nailed it in that second Avengers movie,
Yeah.
where he becomes the Hulk and they end up wrecking part of the city and stuff. So I thought, you know what? I'm gonna have him turn into the Hulk when he doesn't want to. The third ingredient in that little recipe is that I was a charter subscriber to New Woman magazine. Okay. And because I like to keep track of, what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And so I was a charter subscriber, and it was a good magazine. And they had a series of articles in the first, I don't know how many issues, about post-rape syndrome. And it apparently there's a lot of research was going on, and they were discovering that a lot of people, when they're under that kind of attack or other kinds of, really off the wall, unexpected attacks, they're almost in shock and they don't even understand what's happening at first. And that all of the horror and revulsion comes in later after it's over. I thought, there you go. So what I did is I had a scene where Banner was attacked. Okay. And he successfully because he's just in shock. He doesn't, react. He doesn't turn to the Hulk and beat up the bad guys. But he does get away. And then when he's safe, when he's outside, he's safe. And then what was happening really washes over him. And he's like, oh no, not now. And he becomes the Hulk and he, does some tearing up of the city. Well, it never occurred to me that anybody would be offended by that. And maybe I'm just stupid. I don't know. But the thing is, when that came out, how dare you use a gay person as a villain? So I get calls from some of the gay papers in New York, and I basically was able to say, look, you know, Marvel's an equal opportunity employer. Anybody can be a villain. You know, we're not like that. It was based on a real incident, and you know, and most of them just said, oh, all right. I mean, I didn't think it was a big enough story to do anything with. The Advocate, which is the biggest paper, insisted on sending somebody to interview me. Oh,
Mhm.
fine, happy to do that. So the guy comes in, he sits in my guest chair, and he opens his notebook and he says, "Why is Marvel anti-gay?" I said, "We're not." He said, "Well, why are you anti-gay?" I said, "Well, I'm not." And he said, "Well, if you're not anti-gay and Marvel isn't anti-gay, how come Marvel doesn't have any gay characters?" I said, "We have lots of them." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "We have lots of gay characters." He said, "Which ones?" I said, "You can't tell, can you?" Right? So he folds his notebook and he leaves. And he writes the story he was going to write no
No
matter
matter
what.
what.
Okay. And so, you know, that lives to this day, you know, that I meanwhile, within a month of that is when we published Alpha Flight featuring North Star.
Yep.
Because Bill Mantlo was the first guy to come to me. He said, "I want to do a gay character." I said, "Okay, you know, so." And he said, "That's all right." I said, "Of course," you know. Um, and so he wanted to put this character in Alpha Flight. The one thing I did say is that I I wanted to respect the intent of the creators on the old characters.
Hmm.
In other words, I don't think Jack Kirby and Joe Simon and Stan ever would imagine Captain America being gay or a Nazi or anything like that.
Yeah.
I was I said no, I don't want you making the sweeping changes with Thor or you know Spider-Man or you know they are what their creators intended them to be and they should remain that way. You can develop them, but I you know I don't want to go you know all politically correct here. And so nobody had a problem with that. Everybody thought that was fine, except of course when the fanzines get a hold of it. Shooter says no Marvel characters are gay.
Which is still on your Wikipedia.
Yeah, I know. It depends on who edits it that week, but at any rate, it's all baloney. I mean, if they were standing there beside me the whole time, they would have seen. It was, but they weren't. So, and you know, there's nothing I can do about it. So I don't really care.
Well, there's something we're doing about it because we're actually talking about it now.
Yeah, well,
Now,
okay.
and nobody will, and frankly, I don't have enough listeners for us to make a huge dent, but at least you and I both know the truth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I told you what really happened.
Yeah.
And
What
people, they can believe me, they can believe the other people who weren't there, or they whatever they want. I don't care.
what do you think are the criticisms that are valid that you've heard consistently or some of the stuff over the years?
Oh, I've heard people say that I was not as warm and fuzzy as I ought to be, and one criticism I got, which I still argue with, was um, Vince Coletta, uh, who he gets maligned more than me,
Yeah.
and he wasn't a bad guy. He was a pretty good guy, but he you know I would go over books and go over things, and I would talk to the editors, you know, this, you know, if there were mistakes or things I thought they could have done better or whatever. I would give critiques. Like I said, I never say you must do this, you can't do that. I would just say, here's where you could have done better, or, you know, why does this book have spelling errors in it?
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that. And so Vince was actually taking acting classes. He was almost cast in The Godfather, and as a result, an agent wanted to represent him and pay for the headshots and pay for the acting classes and stuff. Okay, so he said, you know, I think you have a problem with this criticizing people. I said, why? He said, why don't you come with me to my class? Okay, so I went to his class, and a bunch of would-be actors, you know, there, and the way this teacher worked is he had a TV set up in his room there and a video camera filming the actor when they were on his little stage. And so they'd all go home with an assignment and they'd come back and they would act something in front of the stage. In this case, they were still doing monologues and stuff. So this one fellow was doing a Lenny Bruce monologue, and he gets up there, and he's probably the worst I ever saw. I mean, he just wasn't funny. He missed the timing. He shuffled around. He just,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, I can't wait to see what the teacher's going to say about this guy, right? So the teacher, like, he taped it all, and then he's going to replay it on the TV so the guy can watch while he is criticized. So the teacher, I thought, oh, this is going to be rich. The teacher took this big clipboard and he put it up in front of the guy, the TV. So you could only see the guy's eyes, right? And he lectured him about eye contact with the audience. And I'm like, what? I mean, this guy did a million things wrong, you know? But all he's focused on was eye contact. And then that was what Vince was trying to show me. Don't give him all at once, just, don't tell him all the stuff. Just pick, pick and choose. And I argued with him, and I still kind of defend myself about that. And he's probably right. But I said, Vince, I said, that guy is not on stage tonight, and all of our incomes do not depend on him performing. We are on stage tonight. It needs to be right, and it needs to be right now.
Yeah.
And so, I said, we got to get as much shored up as we can. Now, look, most of the great editors I had, I didn't have that problem. It's the younger guys, and occasionally one of the older guys would, miss a cog or something. But I mean, I guess I was between a rock and a hard place there. I didn't want mistakes. We're on stage, guys. I mean, see, comic books is a relationship marketing medium. It has very little to do with magazines, nothing to do with books. It's relationship marketing. It has more to do with single malt scotch than it has to do with magazines. Magazines are sold by the pretty picture of some celebrity on the cover and all little articles listed down the side that you want to read. Books are sold by the name of the author, which they put really big, usually bigger than the title. And even if the author isn't well known, they'll do that just to, so you'll say, oh, that guy must be important, Comics are relationship. Somebody buys a Spider-Man comic book and they like it. You haven't sold that comic book. You've sold the next 10.
Yeah.
You understand? I mean, if you can get if that book is good and you can get people to care about Spider-Man and those other characters in it, and if those characters mean something to them, if they find some relationship with Spider-Man, they're going to buy the next 10. And even if two in the middle are lousy, they'll say, well, maybe it'll get better. Maybe it'll get better. No, but they'll buy 10, right? And so I kept telling the guys, imagine that this is the first one that anyone ever reads, and you want them to buy 10 more. Make it good, care about it, make it mean something, think it through, make it make sense. All I preach philosophy. I never said have them do this or have them do that. I preach philosophy, and I mean, people like Larry say, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And the Louise, you don't have to tell her anything. Archie Goodwin, he was the smartest man on earth. I mean, and most of the guys are really good like that. Bob Budiansky, Carl Potts, Jim Salick over there. Most of them were really, really good. And sometimes they'd let a creator get away with something. I'd say, and we talk about it. But what I wanted to do was build the relationship, make those books so good that people just couldn't wait for the next one.
I'm trying to think of how to phrase it. I've got all my questions over here and I'm back and forth.
Get daring. It's all right.
But I want to go down a little bit of regret. And I'm curious, is there any big thing, and this can be personal, this can be work, is there a big thing that you turned down, that you miss, that you wish you had back? And what's the big thing you turned down and you went, thank God?
Well, I mean, like I said, the president of the company was the only guy who could overrule me, but the licensing people and the circulation guy,
Yeah.
he had his ear too. I mean, I was one of 7 vice presidents, I believe. And so they had his ear too. So if for some reason the licensing people in their travels came across some toy or some property, maybe they would go to Galton because especially if they'd gone to me and said, "What do you think?" And I say, "I don't think so." Then they go to Galton, the president, and every once in a while he would say, "Hey, let's do this Star Ears thing," because he get talked into it by the licensing guy
Right.
or the circulation guy would his comments were usually negative. He would say, "Oh, the kung fu craze is over. We should get rid of this Master of Kung Fu book," and stuff like that. But often the licensing people would talk him into something, and then next thing you know, I'm doing it. So I regret some of that, but I didn't have the power to change it. As far as what we actually did, like I said, I had a very free hand, and we did everything we wanted to do. And I also, would go out on a limb and swing for the fences. Dakota North, I mean, I didn't have high hopes for that, honestly, because
Mm-hmm.
Tony Samuels was new and he was talented, but I didn't. But I thought we're Marvel Comics. If we can't experiment, who can? Same with Power Pack. When Louise Simonson and June Brigman showed me that, and they said we want to do this book, and it's about these really young kids. I thought this is not likely to sell like the X-Men, but you know what? It was so beautiful and it was so sweet. I said, we're doing this. And guess what? It outsold Superman by 125,000 copies. So, which was low for Marvel, but pretty good for them. It would have been a big hit for them. Anyway, there were things like that where we just swing the fence. New Mutants comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think Bob McLeod started off drawing it, and then I guess at one point Chris and Louise needed another artist. And often what would happen is that, people would talk Louise into something and she'd say, check with Jim, you know. And so Chris Claremont and Bill Sienkiewicz came into my office and they said, we want to do New Mutants together. And one of them said, but we want to do it all experimental, you know. And I thought, all right, you got New Mutants, that's popular. You got Claremont, he's great. You got Sienkiewicz, he's a genius, you know. What's not to do? Let's swing for the fences. We're Marvel Comics. Let's just take a shot here. I said, all right, guys, fine. You'll never hear from me about you're not telling the story clearly enough or any of the other stuff I usually say to people. I said, go ahead, experiment. Let's see what happens. And what happened was, I think, kind of predictable. The newsstand sales went down because a lot of young readers buy at the newsstand and they couldn't make sense of that stuff at all. Bill was doing some really crazy layouts and stuff. But Chris, to his credit, like I thought, in the dialogue, in the narrative, he pretty much carried the story. So you had Bill's brilliant pictures, and you had Chris tying it all together, and then so in the direct market, the sales skyrocketed because guys like us, we'll sit there and stare at that page for 15 minutes to figure it out, whereas a newsstand kid probably throw it over his shoulder. So it turned out to be a hit. Lost some traction on the newsstand, but did really well direct. And I was glad we did it because you give a guy like that a shot, and sometimes they'll sometimes the stuff's unreadable, and sometimes they'll open a door that you didn't know was there. Frank Miller did the same thing. I mean, once he learned the fundamentals of storytelling, then he started experimenting. Most of his experiments early on were really great. I mean, he did things like that long, narrow panel down the side for an establishing shot, usually architecture. And then he did 5 movie screen shaped panels down the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Movie screen, that's what you see if you're there. That's why movie screens are shaped that way.
Yeah.
So, and no one had thought of that before. And Frank he kept thinking of things that no one had thought of before. And so after teaching him, all of a sudden, all of us are learning from him. I like that. I like the, guy earns his chops, let him swing for the fences. Larry Hama wanted to do an all silent book with, what's his face?
Now, unfortunately, the other two would be able to rattle this one off from you, whereas I'm not going to be able to. Sorry about that.
What?
They would be
Oh,
the
right.
other two would be able to
Yeah.
rattle that name off quicker than me.
I
It's okay. That's okay. We can. Um, I promised you I would.
guys,
Okay.
Snake Eyes. He couldn't talk.
Yeah.
So Larry did an all silent issue. I'm telling you, there are some people, if they asked me if they could do an all silent issue, I said, you're not ready yet. You know, but Larry, sure. And he pulled it off. It was great. I paid him for the script too, by the way.
No, it's just funny. Is where you put it. Uh, I promised you I wouldn't ask you about the 13-year-old supporting the family. It's a story that's been told many, many, many other times. But I'm curious because once again, you and I have talked several times, really not so much about comics, it's just much about you were talking about philosophy, just our philosophies in life, philosophies in family. If there was a different path because comics came at you so early and made your future for lack of a better way of putting it so bright, what do you think that path would have been? What is something else, what other interests, other ways you could have went? Like we all sit around sometimes and think about those lives not led, right? We start
Yeah.
waxing philosophically in our head about Robert Frost poems and the road less
Yeah.
traveled and other things. You know what I mean? We all tend to do it. You have a drink or two going, I could have been, or
Yeah,
something
well,
like that.
I do have my alternative timeline. I when I was I'm a Cold War kid.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I mean, all the time I was little and growing up, it was Cold War, and you if you weren't there, you can't imagine it. It was Edward R. Murrow telling you every night that the Russians had a bigger hydrogen bomb that they tested. It was every day you're hearing about they have air superiority. They have, there's a bomber gap, there's a missile gap, and then especially there was a science and technology gap. And Russian kids learn engineering and science and math, and American kids learn farming. And so you're hearing this every day, and the world seems on the brink of war. The Hungarian Revolution in I think 57,
Mm-hmm.
was put down, tanks rolling through Budapest and all that, or wherever. Sorry, but I mean, like this kind of just hammered with us every day. And then I think again, maybe at 57, I'm not sure. I think so. I think it was first grade. The Russians put a satellite in orbit, Sputnik.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm telling you, America went crazy. Oh my God, this thing is going around the Earth at 18,000 miles an hour. They could put nuclear bombs in that. They could bomb us from space, and it was a huge, paranoia booster, I mean, it was huge. And somewhere in there, little Jimmy decided he wanted to be a scientist, right? And being the rather intense person that I am, I went at it hammer and tongs. I mean, when you're in grade school, there's only so much science available to you. But I started reading books on my own. I learned to read very young, and so I was, as a matter of fact, when I was in fourth grade, they gave us a reading test,
Mm-hmm.
and this one young lady in my class, the teacher said, "Congratulations, you're reading at the second year college level. It's really terrific." And she was a brilliant young girl, and she privately called me up to her desk and she said, "You're off the chart, dude.
Yep.
The scale doesn't go that high."
Yeah.
So, um, why? Because whenever time I sat down with a book that was challenging, I had a dictionary beside me.
Because you want to real quick, I know you tell this story, but your mother gave you a
Yes.
dictionary, right?
Yeah, she read to me and she pointed at the words, and so when I was 4, I could read. And then she got suckered by an encyclopedia salesman and ended up buying a World Book Encyclopedia in 1960. And it was the best mistake she ever made. I mean, we couldn't afford it. It was they say, oh, it's only 96 cents a day or something. Well, that adds up, doesn't it?
It's
And when you're wondering where your next can of tomato soup is coming from, that's a burden.
a
I
bird.
read those encyclopedias in order, cover to cover. All right. And I didn't understand a lot of it because I was young, but I understood a good bit, and I learned an awful lot about the world. And things in general. There's a lot of science in those things. And once I got to junior high and then high school, now I had my choices about what to take. I qualified for the advanced math class in junior high school, so I was taking that, taking algebra in junior high.
Mm-hmm.
I had a very good science. I had two very good science teachers in junior high, and I spent extra time with them, asking them questions and stuff. When I got into high school, I took every single math class they offered, um, right up through calculus, probability, and statistics. I
Mm-hmm.
took 6 years of science in 4 years of high school. Okay, I biology 1 or 2, chemistry 1 or 2, physics 1 and 2. I took a special after school class called biology research. After school, stayed after school and did this class, in which you actually were assigned to a researcher at the University of Pittsburgh, and once a week or every so often you get to go and be their lab assistant, which meant washing test tubes. But they would help you create a research project, and then you do your research project. My research project won first prize at the for the ninth grade at the Buell Planetarium Science Fair, which is a big tri-state thing in Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Stupid me, I did it on photosynthesis. If I'd done it on steel, I would have gotten a scholarship because Pittsburgh, steel.
Right, absolutely.
Anyway, no, but I was really intense into that, and I was determined I was going to be a scientist. I was going to beat those commies to the moon. Well, two things. Number one, to help my family, I started writing comics in ninth grade, so I already had a job, you know. And number two, by 1969, we'd already beaten the commies to the moon. It didn't make any difference anyway. So, I mean, I wised up when I was in high school, this is insane. And so I just kept doing what I was enjoying, and did some advertising comics for a while. They paid really well, but I didn't like advertising much. I mean, they eventually wound up back in comics and, plowed my way through the industry.
So I'm trying to break down watching you intensely of whether you have any regrets about not becoming a scientist because you clearly still have passion about it.
Well, I do. And the thing is, I guess because I was making a difference, I felt with what I was doing,
Oh, you
and
were.
science seemed to be going along pretty well without me. I was content. I didn't desperately regret that or anything. I made a choice and I liked it. And the thing is, I never let go of it. I was always keeping up with the science journals. I was always reading Nature magazine. I was always, trying to stay in the game a little bit, which helped me with the comics work I was doing. Because a good knowledge of science means you can do good science fiction. Good science fiction makes good comics. And also, a couple of times, several attempts, I tried to get, I was offered opportunities to get involved with doing something with comics and science together. There was a fellow who came to my office one time, and his name was Michael Hollingshead, which didn't mean anything to me at the time. He was a professor of something or other. And he had gotten together with a group of scientists, including people like Stephen W. Hawking and other big names. Anyway, and he said what they wanted to do was try to bring science to the masses, and they wanted to have the scientists explain whatever their pet theory was to someone like me, and then I would do a comic book illustrating it in simpler terms, but accurately in simpler terms. We were going to call it Marvel. Like I said, I pretty much had my way. I could do anything I wanted. So I launched a project called the Titan Science Series. And so we were going to do that. And we had all these scientists lined up, big names. I can't remember them now. I have all a list of them. But my first interview was with Stephen Jay Gould at Harvard in his workspace at Harvard. I spent the whole day with him. Stephen Jay Gould is, of course, paleontologist,
Mhm.
ancient history, prehistoric history guy. And I spent the whole day with him talking about punctuated equilibrium, and he was amazed that I knew what that was. I said, I read your column every month, And so he's walking me around in his workspace, and he opens this sealed drawer, and he says, "These fossils are 500 million years old." I said, "Those are from the Burgess Shale." He was always surprised that I knew
Yeah,
that I'd
yeah.
done homework and stuff. And anyway, we were going to do something brilliant then, and then two bad things happened. That was near the end of the time when I left Marvel, and also Michael Hollingshead was murdered.
Yeah.
I found out that Michael Hollingshead was one of the Merry Pranksters. He was one of Timothy Leary's band back in the LSD days,
Mm-hmm.
and I never knew that. Nice guy, but and he was friends with all these scientists. Um, their credit in the books was going to be the University of Hollywood. But all right, anyway, but that didn't happen. There were one or two more like that where it just couldn't close the deal. You know.
Yeah. And that probably was back to my question
I'll
earlier.
tell you one more though, if you have a minute.
Please. I have all the time in the world.
All right. So I was working for Dark Horse, and my editor at Dark Horse is named Chris Warner, his senior editor, I guess. And he somehow knew this guy named Brian David Johnson. Brian David Johnson worked for Intel. And so at the New York Comic Con, Brian David Johnson liked comics. And he was there, and Chris Warner was there. And Chris said, "Hey, why don't the three of us go to dinner?" I said, "Sure." So he went to a nice place. And uh, so first he just wanted to talk about comics, Brian David Johnson. And we're talking about comics and this and that. And then I said, well, tell me what you do, you know? And he said, well, here's my card. And he showed me his business card, and his title was Futurist. Futurist. And he said, do you know what futurist is? I said, yeah, like Alvin Toffler or Faith Popcorn, a trend predictor. He says, you read Toffler? Yeah, I was a kid in the 60s who liked science. I read Toffler.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of hit it off, and he's bringing up stuff about science and so forth that I was reasonably familiar with, and I was telling him about my adventures, and probably the only guy who ever ran a Waldo, those mechanical arm things.
Mm-hmm.
And Anyway, so anyway, we're talking. Well, it turned out his futurist title, he was some kind of big shot vice president or something, but he used the title futurist. What he would do is he had a thing called the Tomorrow Project, and he would get science fiction writers and science fiction filmmakers to take any area that Intel was researching, think 40 years in the future, and write a story about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he invited me, the one and only comic book guy, to do that. And so I ended up writing a story for them, in which I used two areas they were researching. One was genetic engineering, and one was artificial intelligence. And I had, long story short, it involved the meeting between the first human whose chromosomes were entirely constructed out of biobricks and the first singularity, the first true AI.
Yeah.
And it was it's a lot of fun. I own it still because what happened was Brian David Johnson left to become a college professor, and without him, that Tomorrow Project sort of faded away. And so I still own that story. It's going to see the light of day someday. It's called Original Sin.
Would love to read it. Hint, hint. But that's beside the
I'll
point.
send it to you. It's fine. You can read it. Yeah, sure. So
that leads me to, you were talking about science fiction, futurism.
Yep.
And one of the things that one of the guys that does a show with me, my two best friends, James and Chad, but James and I met Harlan Ellison, and
Yes.
we're both accosted by him, which is one of my claim to fame stories that I will tell if someone knows who Harlan is.
Oh yeah.
Most people who read,
As most people do, or any science fiction fan would.
He called it speculative fiction, right? He didn't like the term science fiction.
Right.
So this is from James, and he has a couple. And as we,
What is that? What did you just show me?
well, it's my phone. I'm about to
Oh,
read the question. A lot of critics in the 80s and early 90s, including folks like Harlan, who was critical of everything.
of course.
And by the way, I can't wait to hear your best Harlan story because we
Oh
always
yeah.
ask them. And of everything, so it's not shocking, argued that the two companies, Marvel and DC, had such a stranglehold on talent. If one left one company, the only consistent option was the other. And if one burnt out both bridges, there was no major press. As someone who served as an editor and creator and later created an independent imprint, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, number one, I think that you have to understand that the comic book industry was dying in 1970. I mean, seriously dying.
You
Warner
saved
Publishers,
Marvel. I know you don't like me saying that, and
what?
you saved Marvel.
Roy did a lot to do with that, but the thing is, Warren went out of business. Um, Charlton went out of business. Harvey just stopped publishing for a while and kind of wandered around anyway. Um, uh, Archie went all reprint.
Oh,
No
I
one
was about to say
reprint,
Archie was doing all
all
reprints, right?
reprint. And then on one day in June, DC canceled 40% of their line, and they had the DC explosion. So I don't know, they probably had near 100 titles. So it's like 40 titles canceled.
Hmm.
So all of a sudden, all this talent is walking around on the street, which is a good thing for me because I was able to get, because Warren went out of business, I was able to get Louise Simonson. That's
Hmm.
better than Christmas.
Yep.
I was able to get Tom DeFalco from Archie. I was able to get from DC. I could not believe they laid off their best guy, Larry Hama. If
Hmm.
you can lay off somebody up, why are you laying off Larry Hama?
Hmm.
You know, and that's like winning the lottery. And also had a couple other guys from DC, Al Milgrom. I'd already had Denny O'Neil because DC kicked him out, and I picked him up. Um, but we got all this, and of course, each of them brings a lot of artists and writers with them, you know.
Yeah.
And so we their loss, our gain. And we, with all those good editors, I was able to make better books, get the books on time, weed out, I mean, some theft and corruption you cannot believe, and weed out a lot of unprofessional behavior and try to make it into a professional company. And guess what? We turned it around. All of a sudden, I'm beating my projections, and now I have money. All of a sudden, I'm not paying hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to the printer and the separator for late fees. And so I had money. And so then I start raising the rates. That's the first and easiest thing I could do was raise the rates. I had guys getting, you know, for a penciled and ink page, $35. That's 1950s money.
Hmm.
You know, even the top guys in the biz, Roy was the top guy. I think he was getting $23 a page. And that was a recent development. He'd been getting like 20 or something. I mean, that's pathetic, you know? And so I was able to, for the lower guys, double them again. Everybody else raise the rates and keep raising them so that people were actually able to make ends meet just on page rate,
Yep.
which is the easiest thing I could do. And then we started introducing all these programs, like you mentioned before, healthcare for freelancers now. 3 jobs a year, you qualify. And it came with life insurance, which is nice. It was good healthcare too, really good.
Hmm.
And well, you know, pay for all their materials, pay for their travel, pay for their shipping. You know, just make. I said, look, I had an argument with the financial officer over this. He wasn't the chief financial officer; he was the VP of finance. Um, but he said, this is going to cost a lot of money. You're buying all these guys their brushes, their ink, their pen. And I said, yes, Barry, I am, because if it's work for hire, and nobody will let me change that. If it's work for hire, then we have to provide all materials. You cannot expect the workers to bring the leather to the shoe factory and then claim you own the shoes. So I got a big fight with him. And finally, we called in the lawyer, and the lawyer listens to us for a minute. And he says, he's right. And so I got all that done. And there were other benefits too. I was able to get a creator incentive program where if you created a new character, you'd fill out a form, and I'd sign off on it, and then forever after, not just while you were there, forever you or your heirs would own 20% of the licensing for that character, and that came in real handy for Bill Mantlo, who was badly injured, but his licensing revenues from Rocket Raccoon.
Oh, in the last 20 years, a lot of these families and their heirs it's came in quite beneficial,
Oh
hasn't it?
yeah, exactly. I mean, he's the one that comes to mind, but I'm sure Claremont got a lot of this stuff too and everything because he was always creating characters. But there was that benefit. I wanted to extend that benefit. I knew I couldn't do it retroactively to 1939. Forget it. But what I wanted to do was from the date of inception of that plan, I wanted to include Kirby, Ditko, Coletta, Ayers, the Senate, I wanted to include all the old guys. And I just couldn't get that done. It would have cost a couple $1,000,000, but we were making money hand over fist. And I kept arguing the PR alone for bringing Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko back into the fold, and having them be happy and having them be ambassadors for Marvel. That's worth every penny. I said, and look, we're growing. We're building this thing. We're making money, and it's getting better and better and bigger and bigger. And I told Galton too. I said, you're just not. You're not even seeing the tip of the iceberg here. I said, there's going to be movies. There's going to be TV. There's going to be video games. There's going to be all this stuff. This is 1978, before any of that stuff was around. He's so baloney.
Well,
I said,
Superman
"No,
came out
watch."
that year.
I said, no, you watch.
Yeah.
Superman came out that year. Okay. And it got good reviews and was playing to packed houses. I said, this is it. This is the watershed. I took all 35 people who worked for me. But the only show you could get into was the Crack of Dawn show. I took all 35 people to the theater, bought them all tickets, bought them all popcorn. I said, we have to see this. This is an important moment in our history.
Yes.
And so we saw the movie and we liked it. It was great. And I thought, here it's going to start. Well, it had a couple of hiccups before it really got started, but I remember we were coming back to the office. There were 35 of us trooping down the hallway, and at that point, even though Stan wasn't involved in the comics anymore, his office was still in New York. I had his old job, and he was doing the media. And so he sees us trooping down the hall, and he says to me, "Where was everybody?" I said, "Oh, I took them all to see Superman." He said, "You didn't ask me to come?" I said, next time let's do it together. But I mean, anyway, the thing is, I thought that stuff was destined to happen. And as I kept seeing technology getting better, and I kept seeing the convergence. Video games were looking more like movies. Movies have better special effects. And I had absolute confidence that okay, publishing comics, you make 25, 30 million, everybody applauds. But a movie can make that on its first day.
Yep.
So anyway, I saw a bright future and went after it.
I get it, but what is your Harlan being critical
Harlan.
about not being about what if an artist burned both bridges of DC and Marvel?
Right. Yeah, that was the question. Here's the answer. See, as we were in 1978, as I was trying to turn it around, it was all newsstand in those days. Newsstand is the most corrupt system. You cannot believe it. They rip you off constantly. It used to be they had to return whole books, and then they got it down so they returned a cover or then the part of the cover, and then they would get credit for the copies they didn't sell. Well, at some point, the newsstands had enough clout to get affidavit returns. In other words, we just had to take their word for it.
Ugh.
They didn't want to pay to ship even a piece of a cover.
So you're saying distributors were lying and cheating pieces of shit?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's a shocker. Movie industry, same way.
If you sent 10,000 books to Cleveland, right? Okay, and they sold 6,000, right? That's pretty good sell-through. They would claim they sold 41% or 39% or something like that. All the money from those books they sold that they didn't pay for, that pure profit for them. Then they would take the 4,000 they actually didn't sell, and they bind them into bricks and sell them at Costco.
Mm-hmm.
Or they throw them in the paper wolf and sell the pulp.
Mhm.
or whatever. I mean, they totally corrupt. They kept you hanging just a little above break even, so you do the next issue, so they could rip you off some more. And but the direct market started up largely because these newsstand dealers just weren't servicing. You couldn't get back issues and all that. So the direct market started up, and because we were doing better books, it helped the direct market stores thrive.
Mhm.
And then, of course, DC, they're not taking this line down. They start doing things like Watchmen, and they started fighting back,
Mhm.
and so the direct market started to grow. Now, the direct market is real simple. It's like you solicit your book, you get orders, you print as many as are ordered, and if you sold enough, you make good money. And if you're selling your homemade little black and white for $3 and you sell 5,000 or 10,000 of them, you made money. So it opened the door for a lot of these little publishers who some of whom didn't become so little anymore. Cerebus, ElfQuest, Distant Soil, Ninja Turtles.
Mhm.
All of these little publishers started popping up, and we tried to help them. We helped them any way we could. Now, the bigger players were Eclipse, and then who else? I don't know. But the thing is, people started saying, "Hey, let's start a comic book company." The Shanis brothers, Stephen Bill Shanis, came to my office. They were already a distributor, Pacific Comics, and they wanted to become a publisher. I said, "Here, let me show you how." And I spent days with them, showing them what they needed to know to expand into publishing. And so they started Pacific Comics. Rick Obadiah came from Chicago, first because he owned the rights to Warp, which was co-created by Neil Adams. It
Yeah.
was a play, a Broadway play. And he was trying to license that to us. But in our conversations, he got real interested in direct market. And he said he might be interested in publishing himself. I said, okay, let me show you how. And I spent 3 days with that guy. And then he went back to Chicago and started First Comics. Now those were budding majors, and if they'd done it right, they would have been majors. But so anyway, we were trying. We wanted the industry to survive. We wanted everybody to do well. We wanted to grow. I had one editor say to me, "Why are you helping First Comics get started?" I said, "Because if on a level playing field, we can't beat any of these guys, we don't deserve it, and they do." And I said, also, First Comics is going to do stuff that either we wouldn't think of or maybe we, not want to do. But let's say somebody comes into a store to buy American Flag and they see this really cool Daredevil cover. Hey, and they try that. Or maybe they try Superman. We didn't care. We just wanted the whole industry to thrive because we didn't want to be the last of the Mohicans. We didn't want everybody else to die and just be us. That's why it cracks me up when they talk about the Marvel boardroom. What are we going to do about First Comics? Who cares? Let them thrive. Let them prosper. They're just bringing us more customers. Anyway, so we were trying to build it, and the fact is that for a while there, Pacific Comics eclipsed to some extent, and First were actually competitive with the rates and so forth. And I think they blew it because they did some things that were ill-advised, unprofessional, and they had an opportunity and they blew it. As a matter of fact, First Comics, when they were dying, sued Marvel Comics for antitrust. At that point, we were 70% of the market. When I started, DC and Marvel each bought 30 couple percent. All right, in the direct market started to take off, Marvel started to take off, and in a couple of years, Marvel was 70% of the market, and DC had fallen to 18. Okay, however, in the rising market, 18 was bigger than 30% used to be. If you follow me,
Yes,
so they're doing
absolutely.
fine. They just lost market share, and so we were happy as clams. I mean, we wanted people to succeed. We we welcomed competition. I wish Atlas had stuck around, but at any rate, so we were, we do anything we could to help those guys. I mean, when Pacific Comics when Gerber was suing Marvel, and Pacific Comics wanted to publish this, I think it was called Stuart the Rat or something.
Mm-hmm.
It was to raise money for Gerber's lawsuit, right? and Gerber was going to write it, and he really it was kind of a Howard the Duck kind of parody that savaged Marvel, and so Gerber, of course, really wanted his favorite artist, Gene Colan, to draw it, and Gene was under contract to us at the time, and Gene came to my office and he said, I really like working with Gerber, and you know, really like to do this book. I said, okay, Gene, I'll give you an exception for your contract. And he said, really? I said, yeah. I said, yeah, I mean, for that book, and then, in the future, we'll see what happens. But so Gene Colan drew Stuart the Rat while under contract to me. And I knew what Stuart the Rat was about. I knew what they were doing. I didn't care. And I had many other cases where some artists, Eclipse or somebody wanted to use some artists, and I gave them, an exception on their contract. Joe Rubenstein wanted to ink a job at DC. Can't remember the penciler, but it's a friend of his, and he passed away, and he wanted to ink the last job. Certainly, of course, you know. So we were trying to encourage everybody, and a lot of people had chances, and none rose up. But I knew there was a chance there. That's why when I started Valiant, I didn't think of us as an independent. I said, no, we're the third major, well, the fourth because of Image. But we always thought of ourselves as big time, not small time. As a matter of fact, I've had little publishers ask me how to get started. I would say, I don't know how to print 5,000 books. I can print 1,000,000, but I don't know how to print 5,000. So yeah, go talk to Dave Sim. He'll tell you. But anyway, all right, enough rant. Okay.
It's not rant. It's fascinating, and I think it's part of the aspect. I mean, you're clearly shedding light on aspect of the business that people forget that one, it's a business, and it has to be viable. Now, before I get on to James's second question, he will beat the shit out of me if I don't say, "What's your best Harlan Ellison story?" Because
Yeah.
there's a few people in entertainment broad that if we ever interview,
Yeah.
we will, and if we know they've met them, we will ask. So,
All
what's
right.
your best Harlan story?
Okay. All right. Harlan, I don't know, quickly decided he hated me. I think it was over, a lot of that was over the Fleischer case because
Or is it just because you were the suit?
no, no. Michael Fleischer was savaged in an interview in Comics Journal by Harlan Ellison and wanted to sue for, I don't know what, slander, no, libel, I guess. Um, and at first, the whole industry supported him. Bill Mandel had a party. Ernie Colon donated a painting. Walt and Louise, everybody was there, and they were all kind of supporting Michael because that was a pretty nasty attack. However, when it comes down to court time, nobody wants to testify because they don't want to be the next person savaged in the Comics Journal.
Yeah.
And so they asked me to be an expert witness. I'd never done that before, and so I went, and my job was to testify that Harlan Ellison was a significant figure. All the comics people knew him. He was respected, and his words would be taken seriously. And then they dragged me into some fact stuff, and they asked me what convention I went to in July of '79. I don't know, but at any rate, so I wasn't real skilled at it then.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever. I think he decided then that he hated me. And then after that, he just kind of always hated me, and okay, whatever. But my best Harlan Ellison story is a good one for him. Uh, I've mentioned the name Bill Mantlo a couple times.
Yeah.
And Bill is super creative, and he had a lot of talent, but he also was a guy who kind of borrow other people's stuff sometimes.
I get it. Sticky
Yeah,
fingers.
I mean, when he did Iron Man number 100, Archie Goodman, I was editing the color comics. I was just editor. I wasn't in charge. I wasn't editor in chief. But Archie Goodman came to me. He was editing the black and whites at that point. And he came and he threw down the comic book on my desk. How'd you let him get away with this? I said, get away with what? He said, he ripped my Iron Man number 50 off, like almost word for word. I'm like, Archie, I never read Iron Man number 50, and I'm sorry. I said, all I can remember about editing that book is, wow, this is good. But Bill had a knack for doing that. So one time I was about to go on like a 3 week or more trip to Europe, book fairs, go to stay at the London office for a while, visit some licensees. And Al Milgrom said that he had a book going out that was, I think it was a Hulk book, I believe, and that Bill Mantlo had written it. He said, and I think it's based on a TV show written by Harlan Ellison. I said, no, no, Al, change it, throw it away, miss shipping. I don't care. Don't publish that book. You know, I said, if it has any similarity, I don't want to do it. I don't want to plagiarize anybody.
Mhm.
So off I go to Europe. By the time I come back, it was about time for that book to come out. I mean, it wasn't right away, but the book comes out, it comes across my desk, and I'm reading it. It's really good. And I get a call from Roger Stern up in Ithaca. He lived up in Ithaca. And he said, what are you doing? He said that this is ripped off from Harlan Ellison TV show. I said, well, it is? And he said, yeah, it's Outer Limits. Have you gone mad? I said, Roger, I didn't know, and I warned Milgram about it, but apparently he didn't change it enough. So anyway, I hang up with Roger, and next phone call's Harlan. And so I answer the secretary passes the call through, and I said, hello and everything. And he said, you ripped me off. I said, yeah, I just found out about it. He said, you admit it? I said, yeah, apparently. I said, look, Roger Stern told me it's very close. I said, and if Roger says that, it's true. So, okay. I said, we have plagiarized you. And I said, we can, either your lawyers call our lawyers, I'll give you the numbers, or I'll have our guys call your guys, after I explain the situation to them, and they'll work something out, and we'll do the honorable thing. And he's like, thinks about that for a sec. He said, well, no, we can settle it right here. I said, oh, okay. He says, well, all right, this is what I want. He said, I want an apology. I said, done. In the letter column. I said, yes, sir. He said, and also in the bullpen page. No problem. Okay. He said, and I want to be paid just as much as that writer got. I said, Harlan, that's only a couple $1,000, 3,000 or something, that's
Mhm.
not much. And your statutory damages right now are $750,000
Mhm.
as it stands, because the copyright was $1 a book back then. And I said, that's only a few $1,000s. He said, I don't care. I just want to pay what he got paid. And I said, all right, done. Of course, right away. And he said, he said, I want a lifetime subscription to everything Marvel Comics ever publishes.
What a nerd.
And I said, you got it. I said, you're a AAA list, you get the same things I do. I said, so no problem. I said, so we, draft a letter or something? He said, nah, handshake over the phone. I said, all right, it's done. And we did. We apologized in the letter column, in the bullpen page, and we put him on the AAA list, and I paid him whatever Bill got paid. And I wanted to fire Bill. I was just, you can't do this, and so I somehow that I think I told Bill, I said, look, I'm going to fire you, Bill. And he called his buddy. His buddy was the VP of Finance,
Yeah.
Barry Kaplan. And so Barry intervenes, and he said, look, he said, this is a good life lesson for him, just don't fire him. Don't, and I'm like, Barry, anyway, thing was, he basically badgered me into it. And here's why. If you're in my position, you don't want to be in a war with the VP of Finance.
No, of course not.
That's
First strings.
probably a bad idea. There are ways he can hurt you.
Yes.
So finally I said, all right, I read Bill the Riot Act. I said, never again. You ever do anything close to anybody's, I don't care what Barry says. You're gone. And and he was on good behavior for a while. He did it one more time. Did it to Barry Windsorson, but that was after I was gone. So anyway, Yeah, but the Harlan story where he called me up and said, let's settle over the phone, handshake over the phone. I thought that's very gentlemanly. You
It
know,
is.
and it was hugely generous. He could have walked away with $750,000 because statutory damages would have been about $750,000. And that's how many hoax we were printing. But
Yeah.
anyway, go on.
No, I don't think anyone would say Harlan wasn't honorable. I think we would just mostly say he was batshit.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was a little crazy. I mean, I was at the
He
25th
had some anger
anniversary.
issues, Jim.
I was at the 25th anniversary party that Marvel threw at the U.S. Grand Hotel, enormous ballroom. And we threw a party, and it was at the San Diego convention. And, all the creative people were there. A lot of the dealers and retailers were there. And I guess, I don't know, some other people were there. I don't know. But that place was packed. And of course, Stan and I were kind of the hosts.
Yeah.
So we're greeting people when they come in and stuff and chatting up everybody and trying to be good hosts. And at one point, this beautiful young there was music and there was dancing and stuff. And I'm standing there, this beautiful young lady comes up to me and says, would you like to dance with me? And I said, oh, sure. So I danced, badly. And we're dancing and just chatting, about nothing, just talking. And she confided to me that she was Harlan's girlfriend and he had sent her to spy on me to see what I would say. And I thought, well, what is he expecting to say? Oh, I have evil plans to get that Harlan guy. What? Uh,
That's good. You haven't
that's
told me
just
that one
crazy,
before. You've never
I mean,
told me that.
anyway, so I mean, Harlan was a little,
Twerked.
he could be a little
Yeah.
strange, I guess, but look, you can't take away from the fact he's immensely talented,
He's a brilliant writer.
brilliant writer. He was a living thesaurus. He was so good in so many ways. But anyway, go on.
No, he was a brilliant writer, and someday over another drink, I will tell you I would love for you and James to talk while James and I talk about our experience
Well, I can't wait. So let's
in
do that.
Madison, Wisconsin. I know I'm serious. If I have to drive to you, we're going to do this,
All right, we'll
especially
do
when
it.
he hit James.
We'll do
Now,
it.
now, this is another James. This is the last one from him question, and it's about Valiant.
Okay.
And his question is this: Valiant modernized a lot of classic Gold Key comics, right?
Yeah, I did.
But
Yes,
also
I
was
did.
successful in crossing over into gaming before other companies because
That's
I've
true.
always talked about this about being a visionary. And someone who played a lot of Turok back in the day, that's James. And hopefully I'm saying it correctly. How did those come about? Did it help the comic sales? I can only imagine it did.
Well, the Turok video game actually, I think, hit the market either right around the time I was leaving or after. So I wasn't really privy to a whole lot that was going on with the sales. But I can tell you up through the end of Unity, I was, CEO, president,
Hmm.
primary creator, in the middle of everything. And uh, we Valiant struggled at first. I think our first book sold, I think it was Solar, I believe it sold about 80,000 copies, 80 some. And that's pretty good, but it's not great. Uh, Magnus was a little bit less. Uh, and then our third one was Harbinger, and I had almost a staff rebellion because I wanted to do this comic book about kids who wear ordinary clothes, and the name of the book is actually the name of the bad guys organization. They're
Yeah.
not the kids aren't the Harbinger kids; they're the rebels. And all this like, well, what would it be like if the bad guys had all the jet planes and high technology and stuff like that, and there were a bunch of kids riding around in a beat up Mustang? You know, that was kind of my theory. And I got a lot of flack from my marketing guy, John Hart's Genius guy, but he didn't like that idea at all. And by that time, Bob Layden wasn't there from the beginning. His contract ran out at Marvel when we were just starting the superhero stuff, and Marvel not only did not renew his contract, they said, "Get out of here. We have no work for you." They banned him. He had previously been banned for life but I don't know if they stuck with that, but it was banned for life by DC Comics for some personal behavior that they found not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And so he really had no place else to go. At that point, there was, pretty much nobody else. His Image, they didn't want him. So he came to me and was hat in his hand. He needed work. I hired him as an inker. I needed artists, you know. And I wasn't any fan of his, various little scandals, but I said, you're on salary, sit here and ink all day. That's what you do. And he did. And I had Don Perlin come and work for me too. I fought that. Don would meet me secretly for lunch because he was on staff at Marvel. And he knew that if anybody found out he'd even talk to me, he'd be fired. So, because I was, the pariah, I was the horrible person.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'd meet in little secret locations, have lunch. He kept saying, "You got to get me out of there." He said, it's a snake pit." He said, it's just gone back to the worst it ever was." He said, "It's no fun." He said, it's just horrible. I got to get out of there." And I said, "Don, what are you, 60 some? Over there, you got retirement, you got benefits, you got all kinds of stuff. You want to come and work for a fragile startup that may not make it at your age?" And he said, "I don't care. I can't stand that place." And I said, "All right." So after several of these conversations, I caved in, and he came, and he was a godsend. Oh God, he was great. He was so helpful creatively. Created a lot of stuff on his own. Helped me with other things. And he would sit there at that board, and he would work his tail off every day. And the funny thing happened was that I thought, being an older guy and having some management experience, he would kind of run the shop, the letter paste up coloring people, stuff like that. He couldn't be less interested. But Layton wanted to do that. And so kind of organically, they switched places. So that Dom is the guy primarily sitting at the board and then helping the young pencilers, and Layton was primarily the guy running the shop, and inking. And I didn't care. Got done. It's fine. So anyway, we're off to start the superhero line, and I wanted my third book to be Harbinger, and Layton and John Hartz, the marketing guy, they were appalled, and so they were trying to talk me into doing more Image style stuff. And so I guess they went to a convention somewhere together, and they came back and said, "Look, a great idea. This is a great idea." I said, "Okay, what is it?" "XO." And I said, "That's the idea?" And he said, "Yeah, Exo, like exoskeleton, character called, Exo." And I said, first of all, Marvel's going to sue us. I said, second, well, what's your idea? That's it, And they didn't really have one. I said, "Why don't you come up with something and pitch it to him?" So the next day, John Hartz comes in, and he actually did sketches. And what he did was basically the Punisher wearing a lot of Kevlar and had a huge gun. I said, I don't know, John. And then Layden's idea was a millionaire inventor creates suit of armor. That was his idea.
Well, no one's ever heard of that one before.
No, I said, "I'll do it." So I did it, and I came up with the one and only alien race we were ever going to have at Valiant. It's the one and only alien race we were ever going to have. I came up with them and the whole barbarian and armor thing, and I can show you the treatment I wrote for. I'm not saying nobody else contributed. A lot of people contribute. And I called it Exo Manowar. So it would have another word in there to, forestall Marvel from suing us a little bit. But anyway, so and on that first, I had this whole bullpen full of. We had a bullpen. Marvel never had. We created the Marvel bullpen because I had a lot of these young guys, and I said, "You have to come into the office every day so we can look over your shoulder, because most of you don't know which end of the brush to hold." So we had artists and colorists and letterers and paste up people and stuff, and they would come in every day. And they didn't want to be doing the grunt work. They didn't want to be doing backgrounds for some inker or Bob or somebody. They didn't want to be doing paste ups and stuff for the rest of their lives. They wanted to, grow and develop. So any chance I could come up with to get them creatively involved, uh, most common would be I'd say, I need a name for a girl, because we were all in one big room. I need a name for a girl. Call her Lucy,
Yeah.
stuff like that. But then with EXO, we didn't really have a look for the guy. And so I invited all the young artists, I don't know how many they were, 6 or 7. I said, each of you design EXO. Okay. And so each of them came up with a design. And I made it a point to pick something from each one's design. Okay. One with the kind of boxing helmet, one with the boots with the split down the whoever came up with the striations on the muscles, I thought that was fantastic. And so everybody had a hand in it and they loved it. It was fun,
Yeah.
So we tried to, do that. Anyway, EXO was a reasonable success. It wasn't huge. It did okay at first. It did a little. Harbinger did not do well. Harbinger, I think the first issue sold 40,000 copies. And then it started to fall because typically #1 sells best and then it goes down. If it doesn't turn around by 4 or 5, you're in trouble. So Harbinger was falling. EXO was kind of 50, 40, something like that. None of these are really good. Our break even was 30. The 4th issue of Harbinger sold 26,000 copies direct. And I started getting heat from my evil partner, Steve Masarsky.
Mhm.
We got to cancel this turkey. We're losing money. I was the CEO. However, Masarsky had married the banker who funded Valiant. Between the stock he held and the stock she held, they had me outvoted on the board. So it was really his company, not mine.
Right.
But I was the creative guy. And so I had the nuclear option there,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, no, this Lapham kid is too good. He's genius. I've never seen anyone like him since Frank Miller.
Mm-hmm.
He learns in leaps and bounds. Everything is great. This is going to turn around. And they're shouting at me and yelling insults and stuff. But I said, no, I'm doing this. We are doing this. And if you somehow prevent me, then you're on your own. So anyway, I did. And guess what? The 5th issue went up substantially because people started noticing David Lapham. Went up substantially, and then went up and up and up until it was our best-selling book. And so yeah, but so Harbinger was a hit. And I said, don't worry, I'm going to get him in costume for a glamour shot at some point, and then we'll use that. But we Harbinger, I originally created that for Paramount, and then when they wanted me to change it into a comedy, I withdrew it. But so I had it in the drawer there, and I drew the very first picture of the Harbinger kids because we needed an advertisement before I had David Lapham committed to it, and so I drew it. And Bob inked it, looked pretty good, and then when we did the real cover, David redrew the characters to look more like he made them on the inside of the book, and classed it up a little bit. And JJ painted an explosion rather than just having little burst lines around it.
Mm-hmm.
And it came out really nice, and that was good. But anyway, that's some of the adventures along the way there, and everyone contributed. Don contributed, J.J. Jackson contributed, Bob contributed, John Hartz contributed. He was the guy who said to introduce Ry, let's do a flip book. I said, oh, okay, I've seen flip books before. And we did that. Marvel took a full-page ad in the Comic Buyer's Guide ridiculing me and ridiculing us for doing a flip book. 6 months later, they were doing flip books. The Black Solar cover, that was one John Hartz didn't like. I was talking to Barry. We were trying to come up with a cover idea, and let's just make the damn thing black. I said, that's it. We're doing that. And he said, I was kidding. I said, I'm not. And he said, you can't do that. I said, I can do anything. That's what we're doing. And I paid him to draw the cover. I paid him. I first for a sketch. I said, draw me a black box and fax it to me. And I said, all right, now I can pay you for cover sketch. He said, you're out of your mind. I said, draw me a bigger black box and fax it to me. He said, what for? I said, just do it. So he did. And I said, now I can pay you for the cover. So he got $550 for a cover that, which is good money in those days.
Yeah.
For a cover, he just didn't do anything except it entitled us to use his signature on it. You'll see the embossed is BWS. So anyway, we did the black cover, and John Hart's lost his bloody mind. He says this is a disaster. Marvel took another ad in the Buyer's Guide because they, of course, what other people are doing months ahead because of the solicitations.
Mm-hmm.
They took another ad in the Buyer's Guide, ridiculing me and us. And so when we went to print that issue, the printer said, "Well, we got enough to print your 40,000 because that's what the orders were, 40,000." And he said, "We got enough to print your 40,000, but we won't have much paper left because we were buying our own paper to try to save a few bucks. Your printer can supply your paper, you can buy your own."
Yeah.
So we were buying our own, and I said, "Run to the end of the paper." And so that actually turned out to be another 10,000 copies. So now we have 50,000, 40 of which are sold. That book went on sale on the usual day, whatever day the direct market got all their books, I forget. But when that book went on sale, within an hour, we were getting calls from retailers all over the US and Canada. We want more. I need more. I need some more. We sold through those 10,000 in about 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the press was still set up. We went back to press. It wasn't a reprint. We went back to press. And you stop the press anyway for things like replating and stuff. It's not a big deal. I think when all is said and done, we sold, well north of 1 million. I'd say near 2 million of those things. Yeah. So, I mean, we were fighting with everything we had, struggling. Marvel was no help at all. And then we made it. We got to Unity, and we were selling huge numbers of Unity. And we actually were making pre-tax profit, publishing only, pre-tax profit, $2.5 million a month.
Damn.
Okay, $2.5 million a month with 8 books. Marvel was publishing 156 books, and their trading profit, their pre-tax profit at the end of the year, $2.5 million. We did that in 1 month. Okay, and they had 156 books, and I had 8.
Yep.
So we were kicking their ass. So it was no wonder they didn't like me anymore. And then that's about the time I left. So evil greedy bankers. The evil greedy banker and her husband Masarsky kind of wanted to sell the company and me down the river, and I did refuse to be sold down the river. So they fired me. Good.
I know. It's unfortunate. Which leads me.
Well, what are you gonna do?
I know. It's like back to that whole if you'd have went left instead of right and all the things that we sit around and think about sometimes. But you don't strike me, Jim, as somebody who sits around and we all have regrets, but you don't strike me as a man who dwells on regret. Am I wrong?
No. I mean, the thing is, it depends on what you mean, because I mean, I find myself sort of lying there trying to go to sleep at night, reliving every mistake I ever made since kindergarten age. And thinking of all the things that I could have done better, or I should have done this, or I should have done that. And, I mean, I wish I'd been smarter. I wish I'd, been a little wiser about when the evil weasels were selling Marvel. I mean, I didn't realize how much clout I had. I had no idea. Paul Levitz would have known immediately. He went to business school. He would have run out and got himself a lawyer, negotiated himself a golden parachute. He would have been fine. Dumb me, I just took the president's word for it. He hadn't lied to me up to that point. He said, a lot of things are going wrong. They were savaging my people. And I was on the verge of quitting, and he's begging me not to quit because I didn't realize it. Without me, they couldn't sell the company. I was a quote key man. That's a term of art. And so he just said, look, he said, I know things are bad now. We've cut out a lot of your programs. We cut a lot of the benefits. And we haven't been paying foreign royalties and some other royalties. He said, but we'll fix that all day one. He said, as soon as we're with this new company, he said, their benefits are better than ours. He said, and I'll have the power to reinstate your programs and so forth. He says, stick with us till we close this deal. So it's stupid me. Like I said, Paul would have gotten a lawyer. Stupid me. I say, all right, I trust you. You've been honest with me all along. He never cared much about the comics, but he never really lied to me, you know. So on the day of they closed the deal, early January of '87, I went to his office and I said, all right, time to start fixing things. And his exact quote to me, and I hope I can say
Please.
this, is "fuck you." Yeah, that's what he said. "Fuck you." So because the thing is, because I put in my resignation actually, and he talked me out of it. I could have tanked their deal. I could have, it cost them $46.5 million,
Mhm.
which is chump change for Marvel. Those guys were so ignorant. Anyway, so I mean, after that, it was just scorched earth. I mean, I thought I should quit, and I thought, no, I'm going to rat him out. So I sent a letter to the CEO of the company that bought us. It was called New World Pictures. Changed its name to New World Entertainment
Yep.
after and I told him where the bodies were buried.
Which was originally Corman's company, by the way. Sorry.
Right, and so told him where the bodies were buried. The CEO of what's his name, Bob Ramey, came to visit me in my office
Mm-hmm.
and just talked it over with me again. He says, "You realize that you were indicting the entire executive staff here?" I said, "Yes, because they do nothing, they don't work, they don't know the product, they don't know the comics at all. They don't know what business they're in." I said, there's only one department in this company that makes money. It's mine. UK, a little more than break even. Licensing brings in 3 million, but they spend 2.5 million doing
Mm-hmm.
it. It's chump change, and so he said, "I'm going to look into this." So he did. Came back to see me, and he said, "Here's the deal." He said, "We're a publicly traded company, and right after buying a company, we can't suddenly fire the entire executive staff." He said, every word he told us is true. These people are worse than you know. He said, I looked into it. These are a bunch of corrupt weasels. He said, but if we do a bloodbath, like, first of all, our shareholders say, how stupid were you to buy a company with bad management? And second, that's going to really impact our development if we try to, raise our equity and stuff. And I said, all right, I get it. So we're going to fire you. I said, it's fine, And he said, but we're going to do it like Hollywood. He said, when you fire a studio chief, he said, you don't just fire him. He said, you set him up in his own little independent company. He said, so we're going to do that. You're going to be an independent publisher. He said, we will pay for everything. We'll pay for your building. We'll pay for your overhead. We'll pay for your staff. We'll pay for the lawyers and financial. He said, we'll cover everything you create, and we will distribute, and we will own a piece of it, and you will own a piece of it. And I said, well, that sounds great, However, the people upstairs that I, blew the whistle on, they were not happy with me. And so, I mean, Galden especially, he just dug his heels in. I don't want anything to do with this guy, blah, 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 blah. And so Bob Ramey was not prepared to go to the mat for me. He wasn't going to force it on anybody. So it just, finally, I was just fired, and that was fine. The funny thing is that I was fired in April. I was still working for them in December because first of all, my contract went a little longer than April, and second, I had severance. And so they kept calling me up. What do we do about this? Or can you help us with this? Or what? So I was still editor-in-chief, sort of, but I wasn't actually editing the books. They even sent me on a promotional tour to the UK. So here I am, I've been fired. I'm going around telling all the news media in the UK how wonderful Marvel is. Because that was my job. I mean, I wasn't going to, they sent me there to do that job, and I did that job. And, like I said, they were paying me, and I got paid extra for some things too. Anyway, go on.
No, I just have a story to tell you once again that is more personal, but we'll talk about it later because I've experienced it, just not on that level. Um, I'm trying to think because I've almost kept you 2 hours. there's a few things I want to get on record that I love that are personal favorites of mine.
Sure.
And I've not talked to you about the 13-year-old supporting the family, really. We just kind of mentioned it. I didn't drag out of you
Yeah.
bouillabaisse or any of those other stories, but I do want you, because I feel like a lot of other people don't ask you this except me. You had, being from Pittsburgh, uh, but I don't think that's the way. You had a relationship with George Romero.
Yes, I did. No, it wasn't the way, but yes, I did.
Right, and it wasn't the way. And you almost made a movie,
It's true. Some
Copperhead.
honorable executive met, I think his last name is Rubenstein.
Yeah,
Uh,
Richard Rubenstein was his
Richard
partner.
Rubenstein.
Laurel Entertainment.
Laurel, yes.
Laurel, right?
Laurel Entertainment.
Hmm.
And so somehow they met. I don't know which one of the executives it was, but they were interested. They liked what we were doing, and of course, who doesn't like Romero? He was their head creative guy. Rubenstein was the president or whatever.
Yeah, the money dude.
Yeah. So anyway, they arranged a meeting in my office, and the president of Marvel was there. Rubenstein was there. George was there. I was there. A couple of our executives, a couple of theirs, and the first thing they said is, "Well, let's do a joint venture." Everybody thought that was a great idea, and then they said, "Well, we'll make a film." And they turned to me and George and say, "Well, what do you got?" And George says, "We got to go to lunch." And so he and I went to lunch. Said, what, we're going to sit here in front of all you people and try to come up with something? Hell with you. So we went to lunch, and it was a very productive lunch. During the lunch, we came up with this idea for this character who was part man, part robot, and uh, the kind of the fundamentals of a story. And this gets a little fuzzy, but I think George did the first draft of it.
I think you've told me that before, and then you went back kind of to
Well, yeah, I mean, George did the first draft of it, and
structurally.
George, I don't know what he was doing, but he was kind of thinking sea movie. I mean, he wanted to call it Copperhead Conquers the Warhawks. Now, if there was ever a sea movie title, that's it. And it was really just George was a very liberal guy, so it was all about I'd come up with the idea that there's this anarchists and there was this restrictive government and kind of war between them. George was on the anarchist side.
Yeah, of course.
He was gung ho. So it was kind of a very simple movie. The anarchists win. So I said, George, I think I want to take a try at it. And he said, okay. So I cut and pasted as much of his as I could, because he had brilliant ideas. Unbelievable ideas. The computer named Equator, and the president who insisted on everybody saying please and thank you. All these great things he put in there, and I put in the kind of the meat, and I made it a real war where each side had its things to recommend it, and I complicated it up by having this guy who was turned into half man, half robot, so he could fight against the anarchists. He basically was Sergeant York. He was, as a matter of fact, I think I called him York. The thing is, most people who had tried to undergo the robot conversion lost their minds in the middle of it when they're looking down and pieces of their body are gone and stuff. He toughed it out. And so when it comes down to this final war, he's all set up 6 ways from Sunday to lose, but he's Sergeant York. So at the end, he can trust neither side, but at the end, he and his group have won, and both sides are defeated essentially, and so he takes over personally. I used that idea one more time later, but the Copperhead never got done. But that it was a good movie, and everybody liked it. And George liked it. George thought it was fine. I mean, he wasn't like married to his anarchist stuff. He just he wanted a good movie, and he thought it was really good. Matter of fact, he started sending me screenplays, asking me my opinion. What do you think of this? How do you think this would go? I remember one, it was about, well, I just cut it shorter, zombies on an airplane.
Yeah.
The title was Mayday. I said, no, it's Flight of the Living Dead.
I'm sure someone has done that one, by the way, too, of
I'm
ripping him
sure,
off.
but I
I'm
mean,
sure.
even if it was just a joke, it was a good one.
Yeah, so when I people often ask me one of my best or my favorite, and I don't necessarily have a favorite, but I did interview George right before on a stage, and because I just knew his career so well, I always point to that when you can find it on YouTube because I got just knowing his career so well, I was able to get
Yeah.
just he almost worked with Scorsese too. And when you and I were talking, I don't even remember where we were, what convention, if it was for the Greers or what, but and you came out with that story, and you told me that you think RoboCop is actually what killed it.
Yeah, because we had this half man, half robot thing. And I don't know if rumors spread in Hollywood or what happened, but more than 2 years later, Laurel had never done a movie that big. This was a very expensive,
Hmm.
high-tech special effects movie. And they'd never done anything that big. So they were having trouble raising the money, and Marvel sure didn't have the money. So, either it leaked out or just a coincidence. Whichever studio came up with RoboCop, and that was it. No one was going to be paying any attention to ours after that.
Yeah. I want just a couple more questions if you don't mind, because I don't want to push you past 2 hours too much. And just with the addendum that you could come back later.
Anytime.
So, especially so the other two could do more.
Sure.
When you my kid was watching the Toys That Made Us, he's gotten so much into Ninja Turtles and Transformers, and he's 7, he'll be 8. And you come on the screen, and I'll light up and go, "Hey," because this has produced that. The kid, a 7-year-old, watching a documentary about
Right.
where the Transformers came from. That's how that happens.
Yeah.
For better or for, I think it's a good thing, but we'll see when he's 30, right? And I'm paying for all the mental health bills. And I was like, I know him, that's Jim. And I see these movies and I know that a lot of this came from you. And then Secret Wars is coming. And I'm trying to think of an eloquent way to put it, and it's so hard. It's not about the business, about you getting screwed out of money, you getting screwed out of millions. It's more about how do you feel about that? That Secret Wars is coming just in what, next couple of years.
I guess so. I don't know.
Transformers, the G.I. Joe. I mean, all these things that you've had an influence, you've had, and not just a little, you've had a lot of influence
Yeah,
on.
but you can say that about many, many, many people in the comic book business.
I
Because,
know, but
yeah.
I'm asking
Look at
you.
Larry Hama, how much development he did on G.I. Joe. I gave him this much, he built it out. And I mean, Bob Budiansky, same thing, and so many other people who created stuff that then made a fortune. But to me, I never cared about that. I was doing my job, and I was the creative person at Marvel. I was supposed to be the head creative person on staff. And so, all right, I take that seriously. They're paying me well. I will be the head creative person on staff. And I understand that that means Marvel owns whatever I do.
But Jim, other people have made millions.
Yeah. God bless them.
You have a really good attitude about this that I don't know that I could have.
I never, that was never my dream. Yeah, I didn't want to be Elon Musk. I just wanted to,
Most people don't want to be,
no,
most empathetic human beings don't
I didn't
want.
want to be that rich. Let's put it that way.
Well,
I
okay.
just, I just, I just wanted to, I loved what I was doing. I wanted to do it right. I wanted to do it well. And for a little while, it was really good for everybody. And could have remained good if they hadn't, can I say this, pissed it away.
You can say fuck, you can say piss, you can say whatever you
Right.
want. I just, okay, pass the money. Do you wish you got more of the credit?
I again, I don't really care. I mean, it's like I never got any credit for Transformers, even from our own studio. They thought Sunbow wrote the thing, and I never got any credit for that. The only time I got credit for it was I was sitting there one day, and a reporter from USA Today calls me up He said, I want to talk to you about, it's on the eve of the first live action Transformers movie. So I want to talk to you about your role in creating the Transformers. I said, how do you even know that? He said, well, I just interviewed Erwin Hasselfeld Jr. and he was there. He saw the whole thing and he said, you were the foundation. I said, oh, okay. So USA Today did an article in which they explained what I did. That's the first credit I ever got. And well, since then, it's kind of gotten around, I guess, that I was involved as I was with G.I. Joe.
Yes.
And so it's nice to get the credit for it, I guess. It's nice. But you know, I don't when you're in the middle of it, you don't even think about the stuff. You just want to make it great. And we did. And every year I kept trying to, what can we do? What can we do that's different? How can we change the world here? And so every year we managed to come up with something. I mean, some was sort of landed in our laps like Secret Wars, some like the Triad book. That was me. But you know, I mean, the Marvel handbook of the Marvel Universe was a big thing. It just seemed like each year we come up with something. And so I made very aggressive projections, remember, and I had to beat my projections. I made very aggressive projections, and we beat them 10 years in a row. Okay, and yes, I got the books on time, and they remained on time for 10 years in a row.
2 last questions.
Sure.
The first one, and I'm going back and forth. I still have 10. The first one is a two-parter, and it's very simple answer. Professionally, what looking back, what it can be a character, it can be a book you wrote, it can be whatever. What puts the biggest smile on your face professionally? Off the cuff.
I don't know. I think one of the nice things that happened that I was really pleased about was seeing this kid from Vermont who butchered his first job kind of come around and then turn into Frank Miller. That was amazing. And it was, I don't know, I just being any little part of that and watching this guy go was amazing. I loved it. The other thing, David Lapham, same thing. Seeing him, you know, I think he was 19 years old too. He was delivering newspapers, and we gave him a shot, and he caught on super fast, and he became a star. And then the other, like I say, along with that is, you go to the office every day, and you're working with Archie Goodwin. Can't be in the room 10 minutes and not walk out smarter. Louise, Larry, Bob, all these, Jim Salick, all these great people. And Larry, who's not one to gush about his emotions, one time we were talking about the old days, and he says, I just couldn't wait to get to work every day. I know exactly how he feels. And I think a lot of people felt that way.
Yeah.
And when you get that gestalt going, you know, and they're not all alike, they're not sycophants, they're not, you know, everybody's doing their own thing. Louise's books were nothing like Carl Potts, you know, but they all kind of bought in. They bought into the idea, hey, we're doing something great here. And it can be really good, and we can make a mark, you know. That was really exceptional. That was a joy.
The people, the
Yeah,
atmosphere.
yeah, working with some of the and the artists and the writers, you know,
No,
Bill Sienkiewicz and Claire, Chris, and all those guys.
but Jim, it's very telling that you didn't name a character. You named people.
No, I mean, I loved all the characters. I mean, I had fun writing the Avengers. I loved writing Legion, like Superman, like Spider-Man, but I
I
didn't
get it.
care. Give me a character. I will immerse myself. And by the time I'm done, I think if you give me Captain America, when I start thinking about a story, by the time I'm done coming up with that story, Captain America is my favorite thing of all time. I can't think of anything else, you know?
No, but you lit up and you clearly, it's about the investment that you made into people.
Yep.
Second, personally, what makes your personal life, what makes you smile the most?
Well, I don't know. I mean, It's hard to say. I mean, I feel like I did make the right choice. I did something useful. I have some satisfaction in that. It's a little hard watching it just get, pissed away. But I feel like we made a difference, and it was a good difference to make. And I go to these conventions, and there's endless bunches of people saying how much it meant to them. That's
Oh, it means the world. I mean, having a stranger walk up and tell you that you made a difference, whether it makes, and I can just talk about this a little bit for myself, whether you made
Yeah.
someone giggle from your dumbass joke, from just from the shit that is surrounding us outside, that you gave them a little bit of joy.
Yeah.
And joy that they've passed on now. How many generations are you at? 3?
I guess.
Are getting close to 4, right? Of them, of at least 3 generations of.
I'm at 13, so it's 60 years now.
It's a lot, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I mean, a lot of the bad stuff comes up, and I always have to say, in spite of all that stuff, it was a very good ride.
Oh, it's fantastic. And you have the stories to prove it.
Yeah.
Which leads me to my last question.
Okay.
And this is a cliche question. I hate to leave. I should have twisted it around. And I'll beat myself up about this later.
Yeah, later.
How the hell do we get kids to read these damn books? Because we've not done a good job with that.
Well, first of all, the books have to be worth reading. I mean, the fact is that
And I know it's a cliche question. I apologize, but
good stories, well told. It's going to take an investment. You have to rebuild the whole marketing apparatus, the whole distribution apparatus. It can be done, but you need somebody with some vision and some clarity. Good stories, well told. Get it out there, and if we build it, they will come.
yeah,
But that's a tough road to hoe right now,
it's
and
impossible.
I don't know who's going to do it. There's a couple some bright lights out there. Eric Stevenson, I think, at Image, smart guy, and there's this new guy. I'm struggling with his name right now, but everybody's saying this guy's doing it's great comics. What's the name of the company? I don't know. But anyway, there's a couple really good people out there. Maybe they have a shot. Maybe they can do it.
I don't know. I don't know. I know as a father, I don't care what he reads as long as he reads.
Yep, reading is good. Once you get a kid reading, they're reading soup cans, cereal boxes, newspapers. You get, it becomes a joy.
Yeah. Jim, you've given me the best gift I think any human being can give, which is time. And I appreciate your time so
Well,
much.
thank you very much. I appreciate getting to rant a little bit.
I don't know. And I want to do this again because I still have a ton of things here, but I also want to be considerate of your time, of your time.
Yeah, well, anytime you want. Anytime you want, Joe. It's fine.
All right. This has been Jim Shooter.